Welcome all to the Williams Show here on the interweb at Cyberplace. This is William, and I'm emanating from Mickey's Den here in the good old central state of Washington, central Washington in the state. Some think it's going to be outside the wire. Anyway, we have a lot of stories for you today, and here's the first one I found. There's 4 countries right now in Europe that will not extradite people to die in Ukraine. So what's going on? Ukraine is requesting that leaders in Europe to send people back, young men particularly, who've left Ukraine over the war. They want them sent back to fight. And because it's a losing war, the quiet thing that's not being said is that it is a losing war in Europe. And I think all sides know it. So according to Redacted, this is now being said out loud, that Ukraine's losing, and it's a never-ending war. The countries that refuse to extradite or send these people back to Ukraine is the Czech Republic, which is very near Ukraine, Austria, which is in Central Europe, Hungary, which has a border near Ukraine, and Germany. All the countries, with the exception of Germany, are minor countries, though, like Ukraine, with a history of, and like Ukraine, with a history of aerospace industry, meaning that they manufacture aircraft. And so being involved in higher or complex, I guess you'd say, military manufacturing, they might be a little ahead of the curve, a little farther ahead of the curve in their thinking than, say, like Poland, who is going along with sending Ukrainian men back. But they don't have a long history of creating material war-fighting things. And so they're not looking at it from a military perspective, probably in their Congress, as much as, say, countries that have been more involved in military issues. So we'll see how long other countries in Europe will decide that Ukraine's a losing war. And if you're a country and you're unwilling to extradite people back to their country of origin because of war, you know, it's not because they're winning. So everybody's figuring that out. And so that's my first story. We'll just call that the old possum fling from William. Anyway, here's another little item that's come up on the radar. We all need to get ready, according to Redacted, because the central bank digital currency bankers are coming to control our lives soon. And your ability to use your money effectively will be based on their ESG banking religion. And how are they going to do that? By taking every shred of your privacy away. What they're going to do is keep track of everything you spend your money on. And if you violate their company rules, you know, you'll have your savings, your checking suspended. So we can thank Klaus Schwab for this, and hopefully our Congress don't go with it. But you know, the Fed's had a bunch of brainy ideas recently, as you can see from our economy. moving on. Speaking of religions, our vegan ESG folks in England are having some problems. Vegan activists are angry with how food producers are not enforcing their vegan ways with the rest of us non-vegan types. So now they sunk to a new low and are attacking folks that are involved in animal farming. And they're saying that this animal farming is evil, and so are the producers of food from animal farming. And just like the farming industry in general, or even the logging industry, and that's a good reason for forest fires. Does that sound about right, Owen?
Yeah, but over the weekend, I have to laugh on this one because over the weekend, one of the original, she called herself Mother Earth in the 70s and was pushing everyone to go vegan. Well, she has now come out and said that she can no longer, not only animals, but vegetables and plants, because vegetables and plants are alive. Because when you pluck them, the juice is their blood. And if they grow from a seed to a sprout, it'd be like an embryo sprouting and growing into an adult. And so I don't know what she's going to eat, William. I have no clue what she's eating. But
So,
she says
these
it's a
folks,
living,
I think,
breathing individual like the animals are, and that vegans need to take a look at the breath of the plant. Oh boy, William, we got
so,
issues.
so from their perspective, life is sacred, right? So
Yeah.
that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is for life to exist, even though it is sacred, which it is, you have to be part of the ecosystem, right? That means there has to be life. There has to be death to nourish new life.
Well, a plant
And
dies.
we are part of that system now, right? And folks don't want to take responsibility for the fact they were born because that we are part of the ecosystem, and they think somehow they're gods and can control who are the winners and losers in the ecosystem. Here,
Mhm.
I got a news flash for everybody. We're all gonna die.
And we're going to like
It's
it.
just, it's just a matter of how.
And we're all going to like it, according to Klaus Schwab. We're all going to lose
Yeah,
everything. We're
but
all
we're
going to
all gonna
die.
die
And we're going to be
anyway, and
happy with it. But, I
we'll
had to
get
bring that up because
out
she's
later.
this Mother Earth or whatever, Mother Nature, whoever she calls herself. She has a good point because a plant does die. And,
Sure.
it's not a defense for the meat eaters whatsoever, but it does point out that everything has a life. And I
Right.
think
I
they've
have a
gone too
fingernail right now
far
that
into the meat. And because it's been something that's been around for thousands of years that we've eaten meat, it's thousands of years. You just have to choose. Do you want to eat all vegetables or you want to have the combination of the two? And it's only now that it's being addressed, thousands of
so
years later.
if you go along with that thinking, and I haven't seen too many vegans running around like this, but your
Me
fingernails
either.
are part of your body that dies, and they stick around because they're solid keratin, right? But
Yeah.
they're dead, right?
Yeah.
So we should pluck off all of our fingernails and toenails by that thinking, right? So that we don't kill any more fingernail material.
All those women out there that broke a fingernail, you murderers.
That's right. That's right. We're all murderers because we don't pluck off our fingernails. And the thing is we're just part of an ecosystem.
It just depends on what, you know, William, this all boils down to, it all boils down to what individual protesting organization is going to protest against what. If it's a tree, the bird, the vegan, the meat, the politics, they're always going to find something to protest against. You know, there'll always be the protester, the anti. That's why everybody, we all have the choice to choose.
Yeah, and you don't hear them complaining about people stomping through the Darien Gap to get to the United States, right? Because the Darien Gap is wild. It doesn't have. There's no road from South America to North America, and that area is called the Darien Gap, and people are coming through there in droves and damaging the ecosystem. But you don't hear them talking about that because they plan to get votes from these folks coming from through the Darien Gap. Doesn't matter that the people are dying in the process, and there's murders going on there that'll never be solved, and that they're eating the wild animals there, and you know they're stepping on possums having, maybe there's possums, I don't know, in the Darien Gap, there's probably animals. So, yeah, it's just having just one idea may not be quite enough to explain your world, just saying. So anyway, we have another problem coming right now. I guess the Darien Gap is actually has become a human flood. So we're going to see a whole bunch more people coming to our border shortly. And there's a lot of people right now that are dying in the Darien Gap because of this. So that's sad to see. And maybe for our vegan friends, we should look towards saving each other and then save the plants, or both. We could try to do both, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we could move on. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. According to China Uncensored on the YouTube, Xi Jinping is becoming greatly concerned with the possibility he will be assassinated. Now, I agree with China Uncensored in that he might be assassinated, but I don't agree with it. He's concerned because psychopaths believe they can get away with anything.
William, all of the world leaders across the globe, I mean, even Biden's got tons of assassination attempts. Trump had lots. He had 60 something, or I think 100 and something. So it's very believable.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just this weekend had an assassination attempt.
It's the common thing anymore. So to me, if Jinping's got another one, I mean, think of what he does to his own people. I mean, I would probably be in re-education camp by now for threats.
Well, he's been wiping out people that are part of his party recently. You know, they're starting to become not just a few individuals, but more than that. And yeah. So if you're offing people in your own party, anyway, if you're offing people in your own party, you're not going to be making friends although you may be influencing people. So, he's sending these people off to the gulag for sure, and likely death. And he's got a few problems in China right now. Their economy is in what I guess you'd call it a devastated condition with respect to like real estate. At the same time, their spending has been going up. And, like Argentina in the 80s, it's thinking about that it might be a good idea to attack an island offshore to make all these other problems go away. I wonder what he'll do, Ellie. Do you think he might try to attack Taiwan to make these problems go away? I think so.
Well, I called you on, and you're probably going to address it later on, of the information I got from my resource reporter out of Taiwan on all the activity going on.
Yeah,
with China.
Just like I talked about with you earlier, if you've had time as a government to think about something and plan ahead for it, you can send out your Navy. It takes a while to get everybody situated on the boat, get them all set up so they're not just at shore duty, but ready to go out into the ocean for a period of time. It takes time to work that up. Now, if you're sending out your Navy and your Air Force, now your Air Force you can send out on a whim. It just takes minutes, right? But if you're sending out both Navy and Air Force, both things are going on. So that tells us a little bit about what's going on in the background planning with China right now. That there's a group that really intends to take the island of Taiwan, or they wouldn't be going through all this planning and resourcing and preparing for invasion. So it's a real deal. The question is, at what point does it become most advantageous for Xi Jinping's government to attack China or not attack China?
Yeah.
And we don't really know what that calculus is, because we see everything from the U.S. perspective. We don't see things from the Chinese perspective. People in the United States aren't as concerned with saving face or extreme lengths in history. Like the United States is 245, 50 years old, and China's 5,000. So we're looking at different timelines. But Argentina had a problem with saving face because their dictator in Argentina in the 80s had been taking out their population that disagreed with them and getting them to strip naked on a helicopter out into the ocean and dropping them in, getting rid of them, and that was being found out, and then they were attacking nuns, and the next thing you know, they went to war with a regional power called England, right? Great Britain, over the Falkland Islands, and turned out to be a bad move. Well, is Jinping going to do the same thing with the United States with respect to Taiwan? Maybe. It was advantageous for Argentina and their dictator. We may see the same thing with China. It was just Argentina is just a much smaller country, but still, it's the same basic premise that if you're in political trouble and you need to get people to rally around you, go to war. And they were right. The next day, protests were gone in Argentina after they started the war in the Falklands. Everybody was all excited about it. Well, until they started losing. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on. Speaking of the military, and spending and stuff like that. We have a problem with one of our really expensive military devices. Turns out in South Carolina, they're missing an F-35 stealth jet, and they don't know where it is. So let's talk a little bit about that. I happen to work on jets for a bit, so I know a little bit. I don't know a lot, I guess, but I know a little bit. Anyway, whenever a pilot ejects from an airplane, it's because they have to believe that there's no possibility of survival any other way. All right, so that's the litmus test, basically, of do I pull the ejection seat or don't I pull the ejection seat lever? So the pilot in South Carolina that ejected believed in his heart of hearts that his airplane was going to go down. Now, just because you believe your airplane is disabled and it's uncontrollable and it's about to go down doesn't necessarily mean the airplane's completely disabled and it's going to go down. We've had guys eject from airplanes before that the airplanes continued flying until it ran out of fuel. All right? But the premise is based on all the pilot's training, his likelihood of survival, if he didn't eject right then, is that it's life for them, and the machine's not going to survive anyway, right? So you pull the ejection seat. Now, in the ejection seat itself, there's a package that every pilot has that's loaded in the bottom of the ejection seats. We know this from Vietnam, and nothing's changed in time. So they have a kit, and in that kit they have a few basic items that they may need. One of those items is a small transistor radio with a long term battery, meaning the battery maintains a charge for long periods of time. It might not have much of a charge, and it might not last long once you start transmitting, but you have a radio with a good battery. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So with that, you can send up a beacon, and you can be tracked by that beacon. So you don't have to turn on the beacon because the enemy may track the beacon as well, but you can turn it on at the time you believe it's advantageous so that your own side in a war knows where you are, and then they can come and rescue you.
Yeah.
And so they have a rescue radio just for that reason. It's the same reason guys, pack a 45 or 9mm with them too, in case they have to eject. They may have to fight, right? So this is just one more part of their kit. Well, that's not lost on aircraft designers. And what they do is they have what's called automatic direction finders in the front of all jets. And when I worked for Rockwell, I maintained automatic direction finders, so I understand a little bit about them. Anyway, so the second a person ejects, goes up the rails, all ejection seats are mounted on rail. So in the military, we call it going up the rails. So anytime a pilot goes up the rails, there's a little switch on that rail, and it turns on a little transmitter, okay? And so from the time the pilot goes up the rails until the complete demise of the transmitter or the airplane or both, all the automatic direction finders on all the other aircraft vector in on that. And so if one pilot knows one direction towards an ejection, right, and another pilot knows another direction towards an ejection, now you have a triangulation, and you know exactly where the pilot ejected from, right? So that's good. You can have that. problem on F-35s. They're pretty, well, they are very intelligent as far as jets go. They have a lot of computing power. And we had the same problem a little bit with F-16s. You gave them information of the direction you wanted to go, the speed you wanted to go, that sort of thing. And the computers would make sure that the plane could go that direction. And the reason why is we made F-16s unstable, and that made them very quick turners, very quick to react. And the only thing that gave them stability was the computers. We did the same thing with the S-117 Stealth Nighthawk. Remember, that plane wasn't even really designed to fly for that matter, but they used the same computers so that they could control the aerodynamics. Well, the F-35's like that, right? In order to have edges that radar isn't going to be able to detect, well, it basically leads to an unstable aircraft. So you have these powerful computers running the aircraft. Here's the problem. They can maintain that aircraft in flight. And if you eject and they manage to control the flight, even though you believe the airplane is about to go down and you don't have control of the aircraft, it doesn't mean that the aircraft doesn't have control of the aircraft. It can fly on until it runs out of fuel. So they may be asking, that's why they're asking the people in the public to help them find this aircraft, because it's not where the pilot came down. It's nowhere near where the pilot came down.
Wow.
It could be in hospitable region where there's not a lot of people, say on sides of mountains, deep forest. So it could be down in the weeds, not being able to be seen from the air. It could be underwater, right? It could go down in a lake, in large tide pools, even in a river. You could lose an airplane, or it could be out over the ocean. But for sure, it's not where it's supposed to be. And if the government's asking the people where to help with their aircraft, chances are it's flown off without its pilot, or, like JetBlue. We had a hard time finding JetBlue because it basically drove itself into the mud and disappeared, right, in the Everglades. So something has happened that they can't find $100 million or $200 million jet with all kinds of technology. Now, we can be sure of a couple things. All of our enemies have somebody looking as well. And they're sending out all their spook spies and everybody else in the region looking for trying to help the United States find that airplane. Not really, not the United States anyway. And so all that's going on at the same time. So it's a big deal that the government comes to the general public to try to find out where their aircraft is, because they key up all of our enemies to look for it as well. So it's a race to find the F-35 that went down without its pilot. And we'll see how this ends. We don't know.
Now, Mary got a hold of me. Mary got a hold of me today, William, and said there's a 2-day stand down of all jets. And now we had one crash and one had to make an emergency landing. Another FR-35 over the weekend. So now I'm, people hear stand down of all jets. That doesn't mean they're not going to protect our skies.
No, we still have jets on alert. Okay, the alert jets are who protect our skies. The stand down has to do with the force generally. They're probably going through inspecting ejection seats, or for whatever reason another plane had to put down in an emergency. And we have stand downs occasionally when we have a problem with technology. And losing $100 million jet is that technology. And if you don't stand down the airplanes, what will it look like to Congress and the leaders that provide your funding and are over you in the even based on appearances, you might have a stand down. It may have nothing to do with technology, but it could have something to do with technology as well. Should we go on to the next story?
Yeah, I'm good.
So, speaking of very, very expensive war-making paraphernalia, as I guess the judicial system would call it, paraphernalia, right? Because it's used in doing certain illegal things for paraphernalia, and you know that's what they call it when you go into court. Well, governments have paraphernalia too. I guess you'd call them F-35s of war-making paraphernalia. Anyway, it's just William doing William. Anyway, as I said earlier, the Ukrainian war is not going exactly to plan. And there are inherent shortages on both sides. And both Russia and Ukraine are having to find their hardware as quickly as they can, wherever they can. So we've had Mr. Putin looking for paraphernalia in North Korea. And now Zelensky is needing some more killing implements or paraphernalia, and so he's looking to Congress again. And you know, the fact is, if this war keeps being this war could go on for another 20 years if there's enough equipment sending to that region.
I did have a thing where North Korea plans to build up an arsenal of equipment and war machines after looking at what Putin had.
So if you're Mr. Kim and you're about to send half of your arsenal on a train to Russia, you're going to have to explain that to the Korean people. So they're going to build up a new military arsenal to replace the old military arsenal. So they don't have to worry about that. I think that's part of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though Ukraine is a regional threat in Eastern Europe, you know, the U.S., United States, and Russia are the ones that are basically supporting this war. And they only have a certain amount in their stockpiles, or they'll have to expand their stockpiles to meet the need, right? And if those stockpiles are destroyed, it leaves the door open for crazy folks, maybe in Europe, like Mr. Klaus Schwab, I suppose, to become the new de facto power, because, you know, the United States and Russia suddenly don't have the amount of arms on hand that they used to have. So suddenly our NATO friends become, well, frenemies, right? And wars tend to create strange bedfellows, like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. They share a border. They fought wars with each other. They're willing to kill each other at a moment's notice, and now they're sharing weapons of war, right? And the United States is trying to help a country that we know has been involved in banking shenanigans and corruption and all kinds of crazy stuff, but suddenly, because they're on Russia's doorstep, well, it might be advantageous for us to send military weapons. But the problem is this with wars, especially civil wars, right? Civil wars, when it's father against father, son against son, son against father, mother, daughter, you get the idea. They're willing to expend everything available to meet their military objectives. These aren't calculations anymore. This is a blood feud, and they will literally, in a civil war, combatants in a civil war will consume every weapon available for as long as you send weapons into the region, until there's no one left, or there's no weapons left. It becomes an absolute vacuum, a black hole of equipment, of blood, of lives. And that's what happens when you end up having a civil war, especially when it devolves into trench warfare, which is what we have right now. Now, Ukraine doesn't have enough war fighters, so they want to extradite their people back to Ukraine so they can put them on the front lines, right? That's telling the rest of the world Ukraine doesn't have enough fighters.
That's right.
Russia has been shaking hands with North Korea, right? The longest shake ever, from what I understand. Probably a good bow as well. Well, that tells us that Russia is critically low on certain things that it doesn't want to be critically low on, and that manpower is a problem politically, right? So all those things are going on at the same time. Well, we've had strange bedfellows before, just like Ukraine, Russia, North Korea, and the United States. We've got strange bedfellows with China and India, with respect to BRICS, right?
Yeah.
And we have strange bedfellows with Pakistan and Afghanistan not liking each other, and suddenly we leave Pakistan hung in the lurch because we walk out of Afghanistan, and this all affects global political dynamics, and a weak presidency or a weak leadership of the PAC's global military is going to lead to more instability all over the world, because there's plenty of civil wars ready to blow up anywhere.
Yeah.
I think you have Turkmenistan and some of the old Turkish groups.
India.
Armenia, ready to slaughter each other.
Isn't it Yemen and Saudi Arabia?
Sure. You've got Syria telling the United States to get out, and all of these things are not independent. They're all connected to each other, and they can be timed as well. You can tell what's going on in the world by the timing of events and the type of events all over the world. And if you believe, for whatever reason, that you can talk your way out of nations protecting themselves at time of war, that usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What usually happens is people start throwing sticks and stones until they can't throw sticks and stones anymore. So what have we learned about Ukraine recently? We know it's trench warfare, and it's not likely going to go much farther east or west. However, if it goes someplace, it's most likely going to go west, because Ukraine's asking for its people back to fight the war. So both sides, right, have major problems getting full support of their countries to continue getting well, what do we expect here in the United States? Or if you're from North Korea, or if you're in Russia, or wherever you are around the world, you can look for some of these suppliers coming hand in hand. And so if you're here in the United States, chances are here in Congress shortly, you're going to see Zelensky coming back and needing more specialty weapons, because if you have a personnel shortfall, you have to increase your technology to stay in war. If you can't throw enough blood, you have to throw treasure at it. And he's going to look to the United States for help, because Europe's currently saying, no, we're not going to do this anymore. Russia is not the threat it once was, because the war's gone on long enough, and you're not part of us because you're not NATO. And so Zelensky's going to have to come to the United States, which is not really NATO, it's the United States and the supplier of arms for NATO, and ask for more weapons. The question is, how long does this go on? And so, these are questions, and this is an experiment in war, but experiments tend to verify what we've learned in war over the ages to be the fact of how wars go. And so this is probably an experiment that's not going to go well. Okay, moving on. Trying to remember what I said here. Mitch McConnell wants to give more money. Oh, this is it. Sorry. He wants. So the Biden administration. He wants to give the Biden administration more money. Now, why does McConnell want to give the Biden administration more money? I thought McConnell was part of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But he wants to give the administration more money because he's concerned that the Biden administration is going to reduce the number of people in ICE, part of our border protection. So that's the prosecutorial arm of border protection. It's called ICE. And so Mitch wants to send more money to the Biden administration so they won't reduce what's going on with ICE, because, well, Joe's been pretty effective with the use of ICE and Border Patrol. And of course, sending more money to something that's going that well, it must be hard to be a leader. Even the GOP, even if you're only GOP.
CNN, William was went and was filming the front lines with Ukraine, and they got chased back a couple miles. The CNN was there, but they never did televise the clip. It was something they held out.
It turns out Eastern Ukraine's a war zone.
But I thought that was kind of funny because the CNN crew was there, and they what my sources are telling me, they can run pretty fast, faster than the soldiers can. So even with both of them having equipment.
Whenever you have a military marching on you with extremely lethal weapons and you've got a camera in hand, there are times that it's best to not be in their way. I agree with CNN, but why are they there? Are they there to say that Ukraine's winning and then having to run for their lives? I don't know. How's that working out?
They ended up really not showing it. They showed part of the clip, but they didn't show them running. They were just saying that they were there to show that Ukraine was advancing, but then they turned tail and ran, and they didn't show that part, of course.
Well, you advance by running backwards, apparently. right? Is what you're saying?
Yes. And that was reported
Okay.
by CBS. CBS, the one that broke the story kind of on that they were with them and that they were um, had to back up due to strong Russian advancement. But then when CNN did the story, the Ukrainians advanced. So now CBS and CNN are disagreeing with the same scenario.
Sounds like Mitch McConnell, part of up is down world. So, speaking of people making a run for it, our good friends and financial partners there in the super stable country of Iran have just banned the IAEA inspectors from the United States, the NATO West, and the United Nations from inspecting their civilian secret nuclear program. Sure. This kind of looks like upside down and downsides up again. The only problem Iran has is is really explaining that civilian military program.
Now, Iran, that money, that $6 billion, a lot of people don't realize that came, I believe, from South Korea with sanctions.
Right, we froze their banking assets that were in South Korea, so that they would exchange for an impetus to exchange prisoners. So they got prisoners, we got prisoners.
They got $6 billion.
And of course, well, Iran with this little civilian nuclear programs decided they are going to build an Air Force base right on Israel's doorstep in Lebanon.
Well, all the media agrees, even the ABC, NBC, all of them, mainstream media, they all agree that he's not going to put that into humanitarian aid. It's going to be used to build something militaristic. So,
well,
I'll be damned, huh?
Let's say a nuclear weapons program, which could never happen in this administration. But if you did, right? If you did, and you had a little problem with miniaturizing your weapon initially, so you couldn't put them on long-range missiles, maybe you should build a military base close to your enemies where you can pack in something real heavy and have it useful when you need it.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's what they're doing, not humanitarian aid. So that may be why Damascus is telling the people in the United States to get out.
Yeah.
It may not be because the United States is making money off from Syrian oil as much as it might be that their patron, right, is demanding that they get the United States out because they want to build a base in Lebanon. And of course, Lebanon is a nice, safe place, and of course they're just trying to do it because maybe they want to start a resort there in Beirut. Beirut's never had a problem with war at all. So, yeah, it's all looking a little suspect.
Yeah.
We're back to the upside down world where, it doesn't really matter who gets involved with this thing in the Middle East and Iran and its nuclear program. It doesn't matter. They the second Iran has a nuclear weapon, the Middle East is going to turn into an absolute fireball and bloodbath. And so, kids, if you find yourself in that region, the Middle East, this might be a real good reason to pay attention. And oh, by the way, get out. Get out while you can. We kind of said this earlier with Ukraine, and Hafez al-Assad saying the same thing right now, for other reasons, of course, but that's the general thing, is you don't want a major power in the area when everything turns bad, because the major power might intervene. So if they're telling the United States to get out, and Russia can't get in as well as they used to because they're tied up in a war, and the IAEA, the inspectors from the United Nations, are no longer welcome, and they're building a base on Syria's or Lebanon's southern border, which is right next between Syria and Israel. You know, if I was in Lebanon, Beirut in Lebanon, or I was in Damascus in Syria, guys, that's not a place to be right now. That's a bad, bad place to be. If you're living in Tehran and your leadership's about to get the weapon, you're in a bad, bad place to be. If you care for the life of your family, your friends, yourself, it might be time to book a trip sooner than later. All right. And, you know, if everything turns bad in the Middle East, and if you're, you know, a member of the squad here in Congress, maybe having a second home in, say, South America might be a good idea right now, because you're going to be really unpopular should this thing fly off the handle in the Middle East. Just saying. Oh, yeah. And Ellie?
Yeah.
On the whole cell phone thing with the police, yeah, get right up close. Poke that buffalo, baby. That'll be fun times. and the whole thing with the employer doing scams, Billy saved himself a lot of money over there at Microsoft by getting rid of his entire, you know, American workforce and hiring from, you know, Pakistan and India, and getting all those nice work visas, and who knows how many extra Pakistanis he has working for him. Just saying, hey, I don't know. Just know that they did get rid of their American workers for some strange reason. All right. Do you want me to talk about some more employer sham things going on? I have a story about that if you'd like.
Who?
Employer scams, getting money from the government.
Well, you know, I did want to kind of go over China and how fierce everything's getting there. And I got another report from this guy saying that Taiwan is really worried now. They're getting it's so thick of the ships in Taiwan Strait. They're blocking some of the ships, you know, until, you know, like the U.S. will just tell them you can't do that, and then of course they free it up. But they say 150 planes now are buzzing Taiwan, basically, and have been since about 9 hours ago. This came out.
Well, they have every reason to be fearful. The Communist Party, though powerful, is small. It's only about 10% of the people in China. And there's a lot of unrest going on in China. I don't know if you've heard about this Light Banner program. they don't even write words on the banners anymore. They're protesting so much. So the government doesn't come after them individually. They just hang a blank banner to protest the government.
Huh.
So they're doing it because of floods. They're doing it because of food insecurity right now. They're doing it because of people losing their money into banks right now. They're doing it because of the collapse of the largest real estate bank in China going into bankruptcy. They're doing it because China is pulling back a whole bunch of different groups, businesses out of the New York Stock Exchange. So there's fear there. So there's isolationism going on in China, and also the United States is trying to cause China to have internal insecurity, right? So that they're not as powerful, and the United States is less likely to go to war. The problem with some of that is the United States has some pretty weak leadership, and China has a big, powerful military that they haven't used yet. And so how do you get the people to rally around you? And there's nothing better than war to do that. And if you're in the Communist Party, and it's your only lifeline left, because when you're dictators, there's no like retirement program for dictators. You get to be a ruler for life until you're not alive anymore. That's the retirement program. And so if Jinping and his crew want to stay alive, they may choose the war out program to keep themselves alive another few days. So if I were in Taiwan, I might think about getting out as well. Because
even the one over in Somalia, though, William, it seems like a wasted war.
China may be crazy enough right now to make the jump across the channel. Okay, go ahead.
Somalia, that's the other one that we really don't need to be tangled up in right now. We're sending troops there, and I just think Somalia could be, they've always been fighting. It's almost like Ukraine. They've been fighting forever over Somalia.
The UN doesn't want Somalia to be a humanitarian disaster, because then the UN has to act, right? Unless they can talk the United States into going in and providing aid for them.
Yeah.
So the United Nations is kind of like NATO. They like to wag the dog, the tail that likes to wag the dog. And so if you want to save face so you can be the great world leader, right, which is every UN president has the aspirations of being a great world leader. Maybe you want the United States to weaken itself by taking care of a huge humanitarian project there as well. So
yeah, there's a UN meeting going on right now too this week. A lot of leaders are meeting.
They've been talking about this for the last 120 days.
Yeah.
They've got famine just about to kick off there now. And I remember in the 70s when we had Jimmy Carter, and at the same time we had all the Ethiopian babies out there with distended stomachs and moms dropping children alongside the road to die and all that terrible stuff. Well, Democrats, if you want that sort of thing to be happening, just put somebody weak in office and you'll get exactly what you want.
That's right.
This is not a in Sudan. This
Now,
is not a military
did you do the thing
outcome.
on Zelensky visit? Because they're saying that they didn't have enough votes to give him Ukrainian aid like he wants.
Well, the thing is these aren't military problems that are happening around the world, right? Taiwan isn't about to be a military problem. What these are political problems. These are caused because of the political instability in the United States. Yes, they're wars. Yes, they are military problems. But they're military problems because the United States is seen as weak. That's a political problem. And the political problem was caused by the people who put a weak president in office intentionally. So if you don't like seeing all this carnage around the world and your money going to useless wars, don't put a weak global leader in office, or that's what you'll get. Oh, speaking of disaster areas, do you want me to talk about my little government private scam that went on? It's pretty funny.
Go ahead.
So I knew this guy, right? I met this guy, and he's a guy that had been working for Morton Thiokol. Now, Morton Thiokol, I don't know if you know about it, but it's the people who made solid rocket boosters, and they also made high-speed explosives, the type you might use in ejection seats. And they also made automobile airbags, so that the airbag explodes up in your face before your car crumples in an accident, right? And so these are like high-speed explosives. Well, these are things that Morton Thiokol used to make. And so Morton Thiokol was expanding rapidly because they had a lot of jobs to make the engines for the space shuttle, right? And they had a lot of jobs because all of a sudden all the auto manufacturer wanted to have airbags and, everything. And at the same time, they had their other businesses, right? And so they had a big crash employee jobs program, likely funded by the government. Remember the space shuttle thing, right? And so I knew this guy who ended up working there. And he got there and he realized that they had overhired people. Now, he'd have to move from across the United States. This guy had come from New Hampshire all the way to Utah to get this job that they'd overhired for. Now, had they overhired because somebody in the business was running a scam as well? This scam thing might be pretty old, Ellie. Anyhow, the guy I knew decided, well, I got here on a scam and I need to have a job, and even though I'm here and I've been hired, they don't have a place for me to work. And he'd been going place to place. They've been sent, the different departments have been sending people around to basically get hired into their department, even though there weren't jobs in the departments that were necessary. They overhired, right? So he was basically a human ghost employee the other way around. And so, he was a bright guy. So he decided, well, when I go home tonight, I'm going to get a lab coat. And when I come back tomorrow, I'm going to get a clipboard. And so he got himself a lab coat and a clipboard. And he went all around just like before, except for this time, he had his lab coat and he made checks on the piece of paper and he made annotations on the piece of paper and he checked what everybody else was doing, whether you're a manufacturing or you're a manager or whoever. So nobody knew what this guy was doing, right? And so they all thought he was part of management or processes so that they were making quality products, or, you know. So he made himself into an inspector. And he went around inspecting everything, and nobody ever questioned him. He was getting his paycheck. The departments weren't questioning him. He made the trip. He was making the money. All's good and well, right? So that was like an upside down world he found himself in, and he just decided he wanted to keep the job, even though they didn't necessarily have the job for him, and they'd already moved him across the country. So, you know, that worked out pretty well, except that when he was going around checking things, remember I told you they did explosives, right? So it wasn't just the manufacturing of things, it was manufacturing of chemicals and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so he's going around with this clipboard one day, and he had to like get out of the plant area because people were starting to get suspicious. You know, managers are asking questions, department heads are asking questions, people have asked him questions, you know, so it's getting a little hot at work. And so he goes out to the West Desert on the program out there because they have to check the engines for the space shuttle. And every once in a while, they go out there and they have a test firing. They have to prove to the government that they can fire it. So out in the West Desert is where, you know, Bonneville Salt Flats are, the land speed record, and there's proving grounds out there for the military, and there's bombing range. There's all kinds of stuff out in the West Desert of Utah. There's salt manufacturing. Morton Thiokol was Morton Salt. That's where they get their chemicals from, right? Out of the Great Salt Lake. So he goes out there. Well, he's got his lab coat, and he's got his clipboard. Well, he gets out there, and it turns out that they'd had an accident a few weeks before, right? And some guys were inside the rocket engine checking it out, because when you put these solid fuel rockets together, they have to not have cracks. They can't be like in there in a powder form. They have to be in there in a pretty strong solid, because first of all, they have to take the G-force of going up with the shuttle. They have to take the vibrations of being transferred around by rail and shit and all those rocking motions. So during the process of manufacturing these solid rocket propellants, which are basically explosives that burn slow, a little slower, they have to send people up inside, crawl up inside those engines while they're setting sideways and check for cracks. It wasn't something that, you know, they didn't have the borescopes we have now. They didn't have the remote stuff. And you don't want to send anything electrical up inside of an explosive chamber anyway. So you get people, you dress them up in cotton, you make sure they take all their electrical, you static discharge them, and you put them in the rocket. Well, this guy I met found himself out there with his clipboard and a white lab coat, and they couldn't get anybody to volunteer at the plant to go check out the rocket motors. So he shows up with his white lab coat and a clipboard, and they took his clipboard away and said, "Hey, you're in the rocket motors. You check us all out, right? And you make sure of what we're doing. Well, make sure of what we're doing. Get up in that rocket motor and check it for cracks." And so, you know, the employee that maybe overhired so they could be scamming some money saw a twofer right there, right? You got a guy, get him into rocket motor, check for cracks. And at the same time, you had the guy I knew, and he wanted a job that they overhired him for, and he didn't want to lose it, so he's running around with a clipboard. So he ends up in a rocket motor. It's just hilarious. Anyway, so, you know, it worked out good for everybody. apparently in that situation. But you're right, it would be a scam. It would be a scam for the employer. It would be a scam for this so-called ghost employee. Anyway, the guy I met decided to find himself another job after that. So anyway, that was my little story on ghost employees, and scams gone wrong and gone right at the same time. So what do you think, Ellie?
Yeah, it happens. I think it happens a lot more than people think. So.
Yeah, don't climb in rocket motors, kids, because your employers are doing ghost charades. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming and joining our program here on the YouTube and the cyberplace or the cyberspace or whatever they want to call this today. And we'd like to see you again. And if you can, give us a thumbs up or leave us a comment or share us. And we'll come at you with more stories, news, and otherwise. So have a good afternoon, and we'll see you here tomorrow on Investigator News on YouTube, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.